Hi everybody, this video is sponsored by a contribution from Terry, and here's what she wants you to know. This is a repeat contribution, so thank you. Ollie, I listened to your video a few minutes ago regarding the narcissist background in parents entitled "How Did I End Up Here?" question. That's right, narcissistic parents, and it made me think of my situation. I'm the one that sent you the email the other day that you did a video entitled "The Narcissist Cuckold." I love that video. Your video reminded me that I needed to send you another email this time regarding my narcissistic aunt and uncle that have been gaslighting me and my brother and sister for years. Little background on me and my siblings' family situation. When my mom was growing up, she had a nervous breakdown. She was 14. She had to have shock treatments. They put her in an institution for about 6 months. As a small child, about 45 years ago, she suffered a very high fever. So high that she went into convulsions. Her grandfather dumped her into a cold water trough that had been in their backyard, which is in a country farmhouse. I think it brought her fever down enough to stop the convulsions, but after that she suffered some learning disabilities, but she was still a very sweet, loving woman and a very good mother to me and my brother and sister. She was 26 years old when she had me. She had met my dad, and he was 6 years younger than her, as she was walking home from her little job. She had worked in a local dress shop in our small hometown. My father, biological, basically followed her in his car, flirting with her, and got her to go out with him. At the time, he was married with 2 children. She did not know this. My mother had always lived at home. She was very naive and very sheltered by my grandparents. After just a couple of dates, she ended up pregnant with me. And then it was let out of the bag that my father at the time was married. So of course, whether or not he was truly married at the time is still left to be said. I did find him years later and establish some type of relationship with him. The only way to find him was through a private investigator because he kept running from me. He was married with 2 other children. I was 30 years old and there was nothing I wanted from him, just to meet him. But he wasn't. His wife at the time wasn't going to let me have that because they were afraid of what I might want from them. I wonder why that is. Back to the story with my mom. So my mom told my grandparents, or told my grandmother, that she thought she was pregnant or had missed her menstrual cycle. And of course, they always suspected she was pregnant. They were living in a small town in Mississippi, so back in those days, we did not get pregnant out of wedlock. We must be sent away to have the baby. My grandparents knew there was a young man that would come around wanting to date my mother. He had dated her a few times and he wanted to marry her. So because my mom was pregnant, they told my mom to go ahead and marry him so I wouldn't be born out of wedlock. He had no idea she was pregnant and they did not tell him. She said he looked at me and suspected highly that I wasn't his. It's not that I couldn't have been his, as it wasn't like we looked radically different. It was just that he must have known in his gut, I'm assuming. So they admitted to him that I wasn't his when I was only 6 weeks old. My mother got pregnant with twins, and my brother and sister were born 8 months later. We were only 10 months apart. My stepfather and my mom never lived together in their own home. He did have a home, and he was a traveling salesman sort alcoholic type, and basically lived with my grandparents in their home with my mother. I think when I was just a small toddler, maybe 2, he moved out. My mom was the second in the birth order of 7 children. Her oldest brother, my Uncle Paul, who had not married. He was going to become a Catholic priest, but never did, and he was never married. Instead, he helped my grandparents and my mom over the years, sending every month about $100 or whatever he could afford to help out with the expenses of raising 3 children, since my grandparents were not able to get any support except for a small stipend through my stepfather because he was a veteran and got some sort of VA check until we were 18. My grandparents, especially my grandmother, was an expert at hiding things. She had one son who was a voyeur, and he would masturbate at the front doors in the neighborhood. This uncle later on married into a large family. His wife had polio, but was very intelligent and ran their two businesses. Uncle sometimes would stay at home, but he always wanted his nieces and nephews to come stay for the summer because he never had any children. This was the uncle that my grandparents knew was a sexual deviant, and they let us go to his house. We had no idea he had this issue until one day with my sister, he attempted to molest us both, wanting us to rub his leg. He had polio when he was a kid, so one of his legs was shorter than the other, and he covered himself up with a blanket lying on the couch while his wife was at work at the car dealership. He was asking us to rub his leg. We didn't think anything about it. He was our loving and doting uncle that would do anything for us. The next thing you know, he was grabbing her hand and trying to pull it up to touch his penis. And your grandparents sent you in for this. Your grandmother sent you in for this. We both freaked out, ran into the bathroom window, rolled out the window, ran next door to his in-laws' house. They lived right next door until my aunt got home from work. We told our grandmother about this, and she just said, Frank has an issue. He's sick. He has had a sickness. It's not his fault. He had polio when he was a child. We think it had something to do with it. Well, whatever. Even if that is true, which it's not, what are you sending small children over there alone when he's around jerking off in the fucking neighborhood? Holy Christ, what an animal. What absolute disgusting animals. Of course, totally making excuses because she didn't want anyone ever to find out that his son was a sexual deviant. How did they not know if he's fucking jerking his meat at the front door? There you go. Is that UPS? FedEx? Mailman? Oh no, it's Frank with his fucking dick in his hand. Awesome. Awesome. Welcome to the neighborhood. So we grew up watching and observing other cousins in the family actually being sexually molested. Watched my little cousin at 4 or 5 years old because he was such a good uncle in so many other ways and loving and giving. He was able to gain the trust of all the children in the family on both our sides and his wife's side of the family. My brother and sister and I spent a weekend or a week with them. The other cousins were over. My uncle always slept on a couch in the living room where all the kids were going to be. In my area at that time, I had to sleep with an iron lung because after so many years of my grandmother's health started to deteriorate and she nearly died and required an iron lung to sleep. She could function fine through the day, so he would put her in that iron lung when she was asleep. With the sound of the machine, she couldn't hear anything anyway. Her head was turned the other direction, and he was able to do what he wanted with us kids. He wasn't able to do anything with me and my sister because we had made up our mind he wasn't going to. Want to use the slate so that the smaller children were victims. I remember in particular this one cousin, she was only about 4 years old, and watching her stay in there smiling while he was talking to her so lovingly and her massaging his penis. You know what? You should have turned off the iron lung and sealed it in there and let the bitch suffocate because she absolutely knew this was going on. After you told her, why would he allow her in there? Jesus Christ. We had our heads covered up under the blanket watching this, not believing in what we were seeing. When I was 18, I moved from that town. I never looked back, and I was able to make a life for myself. I knew inherently something was terribly wrong with the situation. No one protected us kids. Everybody kept everything quiet. My other aunt's kids always made me and my sister and brother feel like we were a burden on our grandparents and that we were very lucky to have them take care of us since we had no father in the picture. Little shits. They might have just been, you know what, they might have just been jealous that you and your sister weren't the ones getting molested and they were. You know, I'm sure they have some residual anger. After I moved out and was married to my ex, we were going to pre-med. I got a call from another uncle. This was an uncle who was the insurance executive and the brother of my mom and Paul. The one that was my godfather that helped my grandparents financially through the years by sending small stipend money to help support us. He told me that my Uncle Paul is having a hard time paying for his medications. This is a man that had retired with the post office and was also a Navy veteran. So I was confused as to why he could not pay for his medications. I knew he did take a lot for his health issues, but it didn't really make sense to me. But I said, of course, I'll help out. So I sent $50 a month, sometimes more if I could, to my Uncle Paul directly to help pay for his medications. I believe that some of that money that I would send to him, he used elsewhere. I'm thinking that my Uncle Paul was sending extra money to my Aunt Joanne. He would always send money. He would always send money to my Aunt Joanne, who never worked a day in her life, who lived with my grandparents until she got married to a narcissist herself, money. She herself was a very overt narcissist, and at the time was not working, did not have any income whatsoever, and was living off my mother, who was on disability. My brother, who was also on disability, lived with them, and she was staying with them after my grandfather passed away, and she had nowhere else to go. So eventually I ended up paying for all my uncle's medications, sometimes up to $200 a month after adding up all the receipts. I have kept them all these years. Over the course of about 6 or 7 years, around $6,000 spent. I never minded doing this. I was really glad that I was able to help him, but essentially my uncle guilted me into doing it because he told me word for word, Uncle Paul helped pay for your kid's school, paid for you going to Catholic school, paid for this, paid for that, etc., etc. I knew this was not true. We only had to pay $15 a month tuition at the Catholic school we went because we were considered disadvantaged. I know this for a fact because I was the one in charge of the little envelope that we had to take every month to the front of the class and give it to the teacher that had our tuition in it. There was a little check mark that they made after we turned it in, and it always showed $15 a month. All the rest of the kids were paying $75 to $100, sometimes more, depending on what the family could afford, I think. Essentially, my uncle made me feel like it was my personal responsibility to pay him back for assistance. At the time, my Uncle Paul and my Uncle Terry, the uncle I was telling you, that called me requesting to help pay for the meds, also my Uncle Jimmy, all lived locally, all were doing pretty well, and all could have at least pitched in $10 to $15 each themselves, but they never did. They want me to believe that it was my responsibility to do this. But instead, knowing that I was just working as a staff nurse 3 days a week to work on my bachelor's, getting ready to move with my ex for his residency, with a lot of financial burdens on me, being pretty much the breadwinner, they wanted to put that responsibility on me. Of course they do. They always do. They want to take responsibility for nothing, and anything they do for you needs to be put on the highest of pedestals. These people sound like fucking gypsies to me, you ask me. None of them had graduated college. None of them, for the most part, even graduated high school, except for, I think, 2 uncles. Most of them went into the military right out of high school. So it wasn't that they were completely uneducated. My Aunt Joanne, the narcissist, was allowed to drop out of high school in the ninth grade because she didn't want to go because she was nervous or something. I remember her just always looking at herself in the mirror, primping herself, laying out in the sun, baking for hours in her bikini with the narcissist who had been screwing around on her. Like I said, she never worked a day in her life. She lived with my grandfather after she divorced my uncle until my grandfather passed away, getting free room and board. Then she moved in with my mother. My mother had reestablished a relationship with her ex-husband, which is my stepfather that I spoke about earlier. They got back together, all of them, while they were living on disability together. not earning one single dime either on disability or otherwise basically leeching off them. So your mother and her ex and your stepfather are living off their disability, and your aunt goes to move in there and mooches off their disability and doesn't collect one dime, is what you're saying. Gypsies, you have a family, you come from a family of gypsies, I'm telling you. Narcissistic gypsies. All gypsies are narcissistic because they will rob, steal, manipulate, con anybody in their path. Anybody in their path. Anybody they can use to their advantage, they will use it. They are friggin' gypsies are the worst. They're the worst. And Mississippi is known for one of the hotbeds of gypsies. She also found out ways to get into car accidents and become a casualty so that she could sue people. Gypsies, I knew it. She did that a few times to get money. She learned that from her ex-mother-in-law, who was an expert on lawsuits and litigations. She would always walk around. I never saw this woman when she didn't have a C-collar on because she knew the insurance investigators were always watching. They're gypsies. Oh my, you were raised by gypsies. They are people that are expert at using others to gain money and not having to do anything for her except for con people. So what prompted me to send you this email was yesterday. I had a conversation with her because my mom still lives with my brother. My aunt ended up marrying some man she met in a little local newspaper ad for singles, and she's been married to him for probably the last 15 years or so, drawing a check off him because she was not able to qualify for any type of disability check because she never worked, although she did try to get on disability for her nerves. She does have nerve. She has a lot of fucking nerve. After all those years of paying for my uncle's medication, and not one single thank you from anyone, I decided I wasn't going to be able to do it anymore. I had enough. I knew that my uncles and my aunt at this point could afford to pitch in and help to pay for those meds, so I told my uncle that I wasn't going to be doing that anymore in an email. And why don't you say, why am I paying for medication for a fucking child molester who should be in fucking prison? You know who should be paying it? The state. The state of Mississippi penitentiary system. That should be paying who should be paying for this fucking disgusting human being's medication. Why haven't you called that out? Help him out. Help him out. Who's helping out the fucking the family members he molested? Why don't we start there before we get to old fucko's Viagra medication? But I digress. I knew that my uncles and my aunt at this point could afford to pitch in the meds and weren't going to do that. He called me and basically berated me and tried to pull the guilt trip on me again, and it didn't work. At this point, my Aunt Joanne and her husband decided they were going to hire an attorney to try to see if they could help my Uncle Paul's mesothelioma lawsuit for the fact that he had lung cancer, I guess. Mesothelioma. I guess those daytime commercials are paying off, huh? I didn't know this information either. So we got on that whole bandwagon. Ended up getting some little stipend of a check once he died. They continued to get what was left over the next couple of years. It went to the next of kin, which was my Aunt Joanne, my Uncle Terry, my Uncle Jimmy, and one of my uncle's daughters because he passed away, and to my mother. None of this I had knowledge of. They would pick up my mom from my brother's house, take her to give her a little check, or to get her a little check, or they didn't give it to her at all. So they were hiding all this from us. No one offered to pay me back for the money that I spent on my uncle's medications from any of the money that came. They just enjoyed going up and down the road to the casinos every weekend, spending their money that they would get from these checks, like typical fucking gypsies do. So I'm getting ready to do a prearranged funeral for my mom. I want to have all the stuff done. My Uncle Terry is an insurance executive. Like I said, got Mama's insurance policy that was around, I guess, $10,000 initially years ago. When he first got this policy from my mom was paying it. It was directly taken out of her monthly checks, but at some point there were some payments that were missed somehow or another. I wonder how. I wonder how they were missed if they were coming directly out. And they got fucking lawsuit money, stipend money, disability money, checks from this, checks from that. I guarantee you they fucked this up and they were stealing that somehow, or they cashed in some part of it, which you can do. The insurance policy is now only worth $5,000. I had a quote from the funeral director to see what all the costs would be. The funeral, the vault, and the casket would be something around $11,000 and some change. I will be the one that will be funding the rest of the funeral services, as no one else in the family is able to guarantee you anything. No one's going to help out. My mother was a very sweet woman and is still a beautiful woman inside and out. Everyone loves her. She was a great mother to us, so I'm going to make sure she has a beautiful funeral. So I want to make sure that I can pay for this, so I'm saving for this right now. She's 82 years old, and her health is declining, so I don't know how much time she has. So I'm just trying to get all this organized. Because I can guarantee you that none of her brothers or her sister will pitch in one single dime. And I'm talking to my brother and sister, and we have all agreed we want a closed funeral. Good idea. Because you let them come to the funeral, they'll be stealing her jewelry off her in the casket. Probably try to hawk the goddamn thing. Don't think I'm lying. Don't think I'm over-exaggerating. I mean that literally. I wouldn't be surprised if they pick people's pockets, if they steal jewelry. They are gypsies, and gypsies are the most dangerous because they prey on the physically weak. They prey and they seek out the infirm, the elderly, and the physically weak, and they steal from them, and they con you right to your face while all the time smiling right at you. We do not want my narcissistic aunt or uncle around, or anyone that took advantage of my mom while she was still living. They all used my mom for babysitting purposes, as she was always a loving woman and very nurturing and very good at watching children. My aunts and uncles would bring their kids over for my mom to watch and not pay her a dime. If they did pay her, it was very minimal. I don't remember her getting paid, though, and no one else does either. They're able to take advantage of her because of her mental challenges and her naivete and her good-hearted nature. Just like I said fucking gypsies do. That's what gypsies do. Today I was talking to my Aunt Joanne about all this, and I mentioned to her about me paying for Paul's medications. And she did say that I needed to let the past be the past, and that I needed to move on with my life and not be so bitter, etc. Let the past be the past. Gee, I just made a fucking video about that. The past is never the past when you're dealing with narcissism, because the past is your present. That's why you're like this. And like, I'm going to go back to this again, Terry. The conversation you should have had is, why are you letting this kid-touching fuck live out the rest of his life here, worried about his medication, when he should have been in the custody of the Mississippi State Penitentiary? Let them worry about the motherfucker's medication. This is all over a child molester, mind you. This is all about all this over a child molester who molested his own family members. Younger, the better. I just laughed and said, I'm not bitter at all. I'm just stating the facts that I was guilting into doing something that could have been assisted by his brothers for helping to pay. No one stepped up to the plate. My aunt said, well, you should have been happy to do that since he did so much for y'all when you were growing up. Yeah, like making us touch his dick. Thank you. Please explain to me, Joanne, how touching his cock benefits anybody in the family. Please. You know what? If you can explain that, I'll give you everything you want. I won't ever bring up another fucking word about it. And don't go to this, he had polio, and polio turned him into a fucking child molester bullshit. You can wipe your ass with that narrative. Did polio turn his mother into a child molester's enabler, or the rest of you, for that matter, who didn't have polio? What about the rest of the family who didn't have polio and allowed it? Got anything to say about that? Want to throw some guilt my way about that? I think not. You should have been wanting to do that and not feel guilty to do it. Thank you. Yes, thank you. At this point, I was about ready to blow my top, but I kept it all together. You should have. That was the point where you should have blown your top, and it would have been righteous. I said, no, Joanne, I'm not bitter about anything. I'm just stating the facts. Not one single time did I get a thank you for helping pay for our brother's medications and it being up over $6,000. Then she says, well, they may not have said thank you, but they have been thinking it. Wow, thank you for the thought. Thank you for the thought. I'll go pay for my own mother's funeral with your thoughts of thank you. Brother doesn't have a car. My aunt lives not too far from there, maybe a mile down the street. Yet my sister has to drive 45 minutes to take my brother and my mom to the grocery store every week. She has pics of my mom she has taken my mom to get her hair and her nails done. My aunt never darkens the door. She lives just right down the street, or to even offer to do any of these things for my mother. For some reason, out of the blue, she will take my mom to the doctor for doctor's appointments to get her flu shot and thinks that she deserves a gold medal from this. No, if she's doing this out of the blue, she's obviously stealing something from your mother, stealing medication from the doctor's office, doing something. She's got to be benefiting from it somehow. They're gypsies. That's what gypsies fucking do. She could be stealing people's wallets at the goddamn in the waiting room. She's benefiting from it somehow. You just don't know about it. Think about all the stuff they were already able to hide from you. Think about how they were able to hide the fact that your fucking uncle was molesting his own family members and they did nothing about it. This woman does nothing out of the goodness of her own heart. She's doing it to benefit herself. Cut all contact with these people permanently, Terry. Permanently. They're dangerous gypsies. You don't know how much they've gotten at off people. Your mother, or probably even you, yourself, and your brothers and sisters. My aunt believes in her isolated mind that she has taken my mom to the doctor and my brother to the doctor and the grocery store. That somehow makes her some kind of Mother Teresa. Great. Well, Mother Teresa wasn't Mother Teresa, so that's a subject for another video. Oh, did I forget to mention she charges them for gas money out of the doctor's just a mile down the road as well? That's why she's doing it. She don't have money to put gas in her car, so she makes your mother and brother fill up her tank to take them a mile down the road. Okay, that's why she's doing it. She's doing it for the gas money. So my question is this, Ollie. Justified for me and my brother and sister to have a closed funeral service. We only want my mom to have us there. Me and my brother and my sister and the ladies at her church who just adore her. They pick her up every Sunday and bring her to the church. They also call us to make sure that if they have any ladies' activities that she can be ready. And I love to pick her that up. And they love her, and they are more like her family than her own family. I would just like to have your thoughts, any thoughts from the viewers. I will make a contribution on the PayPal. Have a great Memorial Day weekend, Terry. At this point, Terry, that question should be rhetorical. What are you still talking to these people for? They are narcissistic gypsies. They are child molesting enablers. Why would you want them there? They don't show up to anything unless they're getting some kind of advantage of it in regards to your mother. So what? So they can go to the viewing and steal her rings off her finger? Steal things out out of the casket, take flowers, steal from the funeral home, steal from the church people showing up there who are legitimately grieving. Why? Why would you have them there? I would cut all access off to you, your brothers and sisters, and your mother. I wouldn't let them within 50 fucking yards of them. Stay away, keep them away, and start it now. Start it now. Why wait? You have every right to, and based on all this that has gone on, my God, you are awfully forgiving of the childhood abuse. And I'm not blaming you for that, but here you are arguing about Paul sending money for a $15 Catholic school. Okay. Meanwhile, none of this has been addressed about, oh, he had polio. Bullshit. Bullshit. You're in the medical field. You went pre-med. You're, I believe, a nurse practitioner. You ever heard of polio turning in somebody a child molester? That's insane. That's insane. And none of this has been called. You're going to ask me to pay for his medication? Let the state of Mississippi pay for it. And if polio caused it, let him go to a facility for the criminally insane. Because that's what he deserves. Thank you for your contribution, and thank you for your story. This is very in-depth, and it's very telling. But you need to understand who and what your parents, your family is. They're gypsies. And gypsies are very well known around the South, especially in Mississippi. You were raised by gypsies. And you've forgotten what the most important, worst experience of the family is. Okay, and here you are arguing money when you should be arguing, like, why isn't this guy separated from children? But they just kept serving them up, serving them up, serving them up. To me, all this is a moot point because you never even addressed the abuse properly. So, yes, you have every right to have a closed funeral. Keep it closed. Keep them all away. Do it. Do it now. So, thank you again for your contribution and story. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please leave any advice or comments or opinions in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story or question read on the channel and you want it immediately, you know what to do with the PayPal link. I will have it right out to you. This is Ollie Matthews. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all again soon. Bye.